Greetings once again to each and all. This is John Lash recording Newsflash number 7 on the 2nd of March 2015. And the title of this Newsflash is Non Plus Ultra. And this really is a newsflash. I'd like to make that outstandingly clear at the outset. It's a newsflash just like you would get breaking news from CNN. That kind of a newsflash. It's a newsflash that flashes onto the screen in order to bring to your attention certain current events which are happening in real time as the newsflash is being broadcast. So this newsflash is like that. It's actually the first time that I've undertaken to record myself in the paroxysm of a rather momentous realization. Now, as you may suspect, I do from time to time have realizations. You see? All Buddhas and all sentient beings are nothing but the one mind, beside which nothing exists. It is that which you see before you. Begin to reason about it, and you fall into error. Huang Po, 10th century Chan master. That's a realization. And if you just stop for a moment here and consider the realizations that you've had along with me sailing through the Gaia navigation experiment, consider the realizations that come up in planetary tantra. For instance, the realization that you don't have a life of your own. The realization that the source of the human experiment on this planet turns out to be, by an anomaly, the setting in which that experiment takes place. Well, that's a realization when you realize it. And I know that some of you do. And I know that more and more of you and more human animals around the world are having that realization. The realization, for instance, that there is an actual constellation in the sky called the celestial anchor that not only commemorates the event of pleroma replay, in which the Aeon Sophia realigned herself to the pleroma core, but also displays the instrumentality of that replay. That's a realization. I would say that's a cosmic realization. That's as cosmic as you can get, isn't it? And yet it's palpable. It's concrete. It's not just a realization like a smoke ring or like a bubble that pops up in your mind. It's a bubble that keeps popping. What I said about enlightenment a while ago, I guess I've been saying it for a while, is that it builds. True enlightenment does not just come over you in a momentous oceanic wave of awareness and then kind of slowly ebb away, and you live in the ebbing of it for the rest of your life, in the afterglow. There is no afterglow in true enlightenment. It just builds. And that property of building is a characteristic of the kind of realization that I'm talking about. Now, granted, the realization about the celestial anchor is privy to an elite. It's extremely esoteric. But there are other realizations in planetary tantra that are not at all limited to the esoteric and limited to what you might call the elite knowledge of the intelligence community of the planet. Not at all. There are some realizations that are of general access. For instance, the realization in planetary tantra that everything is alive and that matter is alive and that everything is material. That is a general access realization. Of course, those in planetary tantra who have had that realization, and by the way, you don't just have it, you keep having it. So, those in planetary tantra who keep having the realization that the planet is alive and everything is material, and everything in the biosphere, including oxygen, the carbon cycle, photosynthesis, is something to her. What's it to her? Nitrogen. What's it to her? Nucleic acid. What's it to her? Okay? That realization is one that you keep having. And that is a general access realization. People could have that realization and wouldn't necessarily have to be in the privileged company of planetary tantrikas. So there are a number of attributes to the realization that I'm having right now and that you are having as well. It builds, it recurs, it reiterates like a fractal equation. It iterates and reiterates, and it expands fractally in your mind. And those are properties of a true realization. It is also palpable. It is concrete. It is palpable. It is not abstract. Nothing that I said in the examples I've given in these opening minutes is abstract, is it? No. Sometimes realizations have timing. The purpose of this particular news flash is to speak to you in the exact timing of a realization that is happening in the planetary intelligence. That is to say, the mind of Gaia, and is simultaneously happening in the mind of her Turton. Now, I do have realizations from time to time, like the Rhonda moment, for instance. Some of them are really off the charts. And the one I'm having right now is pretty much getting into that scale. I can't really describe to you what the sensation is like to me. I can articulate the realization, which I obviously intend to do. But I can't really describe what it is like for me to have a realization, except to say that it's kind of like an act of nature. I don't know how else to put it. Now, this realization that's happening right now has all the properties that I have just profiled, and it also has the property of being current in real time with the celestial omens that describe the realization or correspond to that realization. And what are those omens? Well, a great many people around the world, those in planetary tantra and those oblivious to it, noted the spectacle of the Mars-Venus conjunction in the evening sky last month. At a certain point, the crescent moon, indicating the Matangi shift, slid through that same area of the sky, and the spectacle so produced was so lovely that many people around the world, such as amateur astronomers, observed it and photographed it. Now, to point to the unique, granular detail of the timing of this realization, I need to specify something about the celestial omen of the Mars-Venus conjunction in the fishes. You can see the conjunction, but there is a factor operative in the omen that you can't see. But if you go to an ephemeris and you look at the 1st and 2nd of March, 2015, you'll see that Venus is in 11-12 degrees of Aries, moving through the sign Aries and through against the background of the constellation of the fishes. And you'll see that Mars is just a couple of degrees off in 7-8 Aries, also moving but at a slower rate through the constellation of the fishes. Then if you look to the left and you note the column of the lunar nodes, you'll see that the north lunar node, which is the only one they show in the ephemeris, because the south lunar node is always opposite to the north, that the north lunar node is now in about 11-12 degrees of the sign Libra, which puts it right in the upper breast of the Virgin, you see, in the glorious area of the breasts of the Virgin. Okay? But the south lunar node, which is opposite, is in around 12 degrees of Aries, which is in the fishes. So there's your invisible component. Not only are Mars and Venus in a close conjunction, with Venus slowly advancing ahead, but both of them are converging with the south node of the moon, which is running backwards through the constellation of the fishes. And you can't see the node of the moon, but conceptually you can place it there. This is the granular detail that corresponds to what is happening in the mind of the planetary animal mother, and is therefore accessible, you might say, as a realization to the human animal. Now, I'm going to say some more about the character of this particular celestial omen and add another factor in just a moment. But before I do that, I'd like to say something about my realization of my realization that the mind of the Aeon Sophia is becoming accessible in correction in a way that was not previously so. I first began to converse with the planetary animal mother up on Infinity Ridge in about 2002. And between 2002 and 2004, I had my initial conversations. The character of these conversations is one of awe. Part of the awe is due to the fact that in the process of the conversation, you realize the nature of the conversation. So first of all, it's pretty amazing that you're able to converse with the mind of the planet in a silent telepathy, and to recognize that is the mind of the planet and not just a fiction of your own mind. I'll get to that distinction in a second here. I just want to say something that I might not have said already, but I sure have been drooling over it. I've been wanting to say this. this is so, this is such a delicious thing to say. Now, let's see if I can get it out, because there's no rehearsal going on here, folks. I haven't even made a scribble of a note. Let me see if I can get it out like this. Well, someone might say to me, well, gee whiz, Mr. Turton, how is it possible that the mind of a single human animal could enter into a two-way conversation with such a mind of such great magnitude as that of the planet? It's a good question. And my answer comes in two parts. The first part is that it's possible because she created the human mind with the properties that allow it to converse with her. But it gets even better. The setup of that conversation is even better than she could have dreamed it to be in the pleroma herself. Why is that? When she dreamed the three-body system in which Anthropos 10 would emerge, well, you know the story. She didn't anticipate that she herself would be the terrestrial laboratory in that three-body system, did she? As a matter of fact, her entire body is the sun, moon, and earth. But since we live on the earth, we're standing on her body, so we pay attention to that as the primary object of importance, obviously. So, she did not anticipate. She designed us to be able to communicate with her, presuming, if you may talk of an aeon presuming, and you may, because the pronoia of an aeon is a kind of presumption. Well, she was presuming that just human animals like us walking around on the earth, if we got turned on to our endowment and came into the experience of fully thriving in that endowment, then we would, from the vantage point of the terrestrial planet, be able to reach her with our minds and have her reach us with her mind, broadcasting from the pleroma. That's how she set it up. That was her presumption. Clear enough? Everything is in the story. Every answer to every question you can frame is in the story. But the trick is to frame the question within the story so that the answer comes in the same manner. That's the art. That's part of the art of planetary tantra. Well, what she presumed is not the case, is it, my friends? Because in fact, she happens to be in material immanence, doesn't she? She happens to be directly present in the material body of the planet and the atmosphere. Well, I ask you, doesn't that raise another question? Sure. The obvious and natural thing that anyone paying attention would ask is, well, what's the difference? What's the difference between the communication you can have with her now and that communication as she would have presumed it to happen had she not turned into the planet? The difference is that not only can you converse with her telepathically in a two-way fashion, knowing distinctly who she is, but when you do so, she brings the totality of her intelligence to you. How can she do that? It's a planetary miracle that she can do that. But that is exactly what she does. And so what I am delightfully slobbering and savoring and drooling over, oh yeah, is the moment when I can tell you that when she converses with you directly, she brings her entire attention to you That is how it happens, and this is the delightful part. It cannot happen in any other way. That's the only way it can happen. She will never give you a fragment of her attention. She gives you her entire attention, believe me. And I am becoming so used to having her entire attention that it's like a confidential arrangement that's going on all the time between me and her. And as I am now able to become aware and hold steady in this confidential and intimate dialogue with the Aeon Sophia, I realize that what she can do in correction is give it to everybody else in the same way, even regardless of undertaking the technique of telestic shamanism. Now, I've described the technique of telestic shamanism in great detail, and I continue to do that over and over again. Instruction by the organic light was the method of the mysteries that was protected by a vow of silence, not secrecy. And, of course, as you know, the disclosure of the properties and behavior of the organic light was never ever made publicly in the time of the mysteries, but it is now accessible to public awareness, accessible to the interest of anyone who looks into it. And I've described how it is to encounter the organic light in quite considerable detail, haven't I? Well, naturally, people want to have that encounter. Some people do. But I have to tell you that it's problematical for certain reasons, but then in another sense, it really doesn't matter. Because she is prepared to give you her mind whether or not you come to the organic light in cognitive ecstasy, which is gnosis. That she can do in correction. She can reach you just as she reaches an illumined telestes in a state of cognitive ecstasy and pour her mind into your mind, and she's doing it as I speak. So I'll tell you what it feels like to be in that kind of confidentiality. It's like taking a journey, a magical journey, a magical mystery tour in the companionship of the most wonderful, talented, autistic child you could ever imagine. And this autistic child is walking beside you on your life journey. And that autistic child views you as a magical child and wants your companionship more than anything, more than anything. Now I walk and live in that bond of companionship with the autistic mind of the planet because the Aeon Sophia is autistic. And so the character of that particular companionship and the nature of the communication is extremely delightful because it's very intimate and particular to each person. So the autistic child who befriends you as the living, animated and animating mind of the Aeon Sophia pours into yours, befriends you and takes you into its confidence, into her confidence. And so she kind of like is coaching me because the autistic child is going to tell you things out of the world of autism that are absolutely spectacularly fabulous. Okay? And suddenly, because the autistic child views you as a magical child and an equal, whatever that child tells you will flare into the absolute genius of your own human intelligence immediately. And that flare will not fade. So, again, I'm at the, believe it or not, I am at the limit of my powers of description. Oh, no, not really. It can't have come to that. I have to laugh to describe it, you know? It's like I have this experience with the mind of Sophia speaking in my heart, you know, speaking in my body, kind of nudging me, coaxing me. And for a while now, she's been saying to me, no, this is what happens. She doesn't say anything to me in that sense. It's like I think of something drifts before my attention as I'm musing, okay? And something that comes drifting before my attention, non plus ultra. And I keep getting this glimpse of non plus ultra. And then it goes out of, it drifts away. And then it comes back around sort of on the left side. Oh, non plus ultra. And then it kind of drifts away again. And a couple of times when it drifted into sight, just for a second, it was as if I could feel her nudge me. And being nudged by the planet is a lovely sensation. And she nudged me. And with the most beautiful and easy, casual, almost offhand confidentiality. It's as if she says to me, yeah, John, get that. Oh, get that. When you tell them that, that's going to be so delightful. And now I'm going to tell you that. Non plus ultra. What it is. And as I do so, let me have the pleasure of banishing from your mind the obvious and singular doubt that you might have about this experience, that anyone might have. It might be said, well, when you talk about what you say and think is the mind of the planet, and what you say is the Aeon Sophia saying something to you, telepathy, saying something to you in a telepathic way, because you don't hear it out loud, is just you, John Lash, making it up. It's just coming out of your own mind, and you're attributing it to this goddess who you say is embodied in the earth. Well, that's a natural doubt. That's a natural objection. Would you like to be cleared of that doubt? Just consider this. It has been said, the last time I saw this point brought up, I think, was in Jeremy Narby's book, The Cosmic Serpent. It has been said, or it has been asked, well, human beings have this thing called consciousness. They have an operative intelligence by which they can do many things. Thinking, speaking, inventing. And how could it be that they acquired that intelligence from nature if nature itself doesn't have that intelligence to give? And so, the doubt dissolves when you realize, if I may be allowed to use that term, not only that the consciousness that you have right now is given to you by nature, which therefore must be more conscious than you in order to design this consciousness into you and allow you to have it and operate it on your own. But, the wildest thing about it is that it's not even a case of the superior planetary consciousness of Gaia giving you your consciousness. She doesn't give you your consciousness. She gives you hers. And so that is as true for the ordinary person walking around on this planet as it is true for yours truly. I have no concern whatsoever about the possibility that what I consider to be the Aeons of Fire speaking to me telepathically could just be a fiction of my own mind. Because I know that it is a fiction of my own mind. But it's a fiction that she gives me. You see? And you. And it's a fiction that she allows us to have as if it were our own. All right. Having presented that little snippet of non-attainment instruction, I will proceed to the realization of the moment. Now let's go back to the celestial omens and see how the celestial omens, the ingredients of the omen, might suggest something about the character of this realization before I actually lay on you what non plus ultra is. Bear in mind that the Mars and Venus conjunction brought the attention of the world to the sky. So many people looked at the sky who would not ordinarily look. Now we know that the sky is her mind. The sky is a biofeedback device of the pleromic mind. And you are looped into it. Your intelligence is just a feedback loop in that larger biofeedback matrix. So people who looked at the Mars-Venus conjunction or watched the crescent moon slide by it are not, many of them are oblivious to what we're talking about here, but it doesn't matter. It came into their first attention, didn't it? Oh, yeah. And in the background, coming out of the mind of Sophia, coming out of her pleromic dimension of designing intelligence, were two massive developments. One indicated by the convergence of Mars and Venus on the south lunar node. But there's more. What happens around the midpoint of the sign Aries? Venus right now in 11, Mars in 8, the moon's node in 12, south node, all of the sign Aries. But haven't we heard something about the sign Aries before? Oh, yeah. The correction of the Aeons of Fire takes place in the apsides of Jupiter. And where are the apsides of Jupiter aligned? They are aligned to 15 degrees Aries, which is the perihelion, or point closest to the Sun, on the orbit of Jupiter, and 15 degrees Libra. Well, if you're tracking me, and you know that the perihelion is fairly steady over centuries and centuries of time, although it does precess, it's standing against, in the area of the background stars, on the thread that connects the two fishes. And the lunar node is shifting backwards away from it. Well, if you're tracking me, then you realize it must have been sometime not too long ago when the southern lunar node converged with the perihelion of Jupiter, and indeed it did. And indeed that was a moment. And that was between the 1st and the 15th of January 2015. Now, I spoke about that event of convergence of two invisible factors in the systemic, it's called the systemic structure, meaning the structure of the solar system. And when I did speak of it a couple of times already, I interpreted it. And I said that when the south lunar node, precessing backwards through the constellation of the Fishes, converges with the perihelion of Jupiter, you can anticipate a momentous shift in correction, a momentous shift detectable in the upsurge and resurgence of indigenous memory and indigenous morality. And that shift coming out of the depths of the human endopsyche is an example of what Marcuse, who wasn't all bad, even though he came from the Frankfurt School, far from it, Marcuse called the return of the repressed. And so the motifs that can now be seen in the drama of the collective life is the return of the repressed, the reassertion of the national and indigenous identities, panic, pan-European alliance of national indigenous cultures. Panic has struck. But most people don't know that this panic is coming from the deep, fertile recesses of their own tribal and indigenous memories as human animals. They're just riding on the surface of it. And so on the surface, it appears to be a revalorization and reassertion of national identities, which is the best thing that could possibly happen, as you know. Adolf Hitler was an avatar of this process. He was a kind of avatar because he brought to the focalization of the mind of all German language-speaking people the memory of their indigenous Aryan roots and of their excellence, you see. And that's what National Socialism was. You know, the Nazis never called themselves Nazis. That's an insult, and it's a form of hate speech created by the Soviet Bolsheviks, the Bolshevik Jews, in the propaganda during and after the war. The word Nazi is the most powerful piece of hate speech on the planet. It is an attempt to suppress and to stuff back into the bottle the genie of the indigenous genius of those peoples who are rooted to the places where their ancestors lived. But there's no way of stopping it. You know, February 24th, I just want to remind you of something very heavy. I think it was February 24th, was the commemoration of the 70th anniversary of Dresden. Now, Dresden was bombed, I believe, 3 times in February of 1945, 70 years ago. There were 1.2 million people in Dresden. The population of the city had swollen because there were many refugees from the war, and Dresden was kind of it was a cultural mecca, if you'll pardon that horrible reference. It was a cultural matrix of the great art and literature and music of white Aryan European Europe. And the firebombing of Dresden, which was totally gratuitous, a totally gratuitous act executed on civilians who had no defense, killed at least half of that 1.2 million. And it's interesting because that figure comes to 600,000 people. If you go to Wikipedia, they will say, it's due to the careful and skillful management of Jewish Hasbara trolls. You'll see that Wikipedia says, oh, no, poo. Oh, it was only 20,000. 20,000 died. They only firebombed it day and night for 3 days. And of course, out of 1.2 million people, they only killed 20,000, 600,000, which is a very good estimate, happens to be, by the word of Jewish historians of the Holocaust, such as Raoul Hilberg, the probable number for the number of deaths of Jews in World War II. Not by gassing in gas chambers, but simply in the course of war, by starvation, by being in the wrong place at the wrong time, by having typhus, and so forth. So in 3 days in Dresden, Germany, the Allies murdered as many people as was probably actually and adequately the toll of Jews in World War II, because there were more Jews living in Europe after World War II than there were at the beginning, according to the Red Cross records. Go check it out. Now, it might seem like a digression to mention that point, but it's not, because it actually brings me around to the nature of this celestial omen. Remember that the constellation of the fishes correlates to Swan Deva, and that is the Diamond Sky Daktini who oversees the great narratives of human history. The Vajrayana romance, the marriage of East and West, the emergence of planetary Tantra and the term of Gaia awakening out of the Nyingma Turton tradition by way of a freelance Turton in the form of a young kid from Maine. Okay? This great planetary narrative is one of the many narratives in the orchestration of Swan Deva. And so the true history of the 20th century, the true history of the rise of National Socialism and the reassertion of Aryan excellence and of the exceptionally beautiful sophistication of German culture is a thread, is a chord. It's a chord in that great orchestration. And the chord is starting to get very, very loud. So the event that we would look for in rectification, which is the syntax for the way correction unfolds in the lives of those who are oblivious to it, would be to see this wave of resurgence of indigenous and ancestral memory and events riding on this wave. And it's not by accident that the most powerful, organized, articulate, and peaceful anti-Islamic movement in Europe is Pegida, and it's centered in Dresden. So you see, out of the ashes even of Dresden, the phoenix is rising. And when the phoenix really rises, is in the following shift. Following the current shift of Matangi with the strong overtone of Swandeva. So what we can expect to see under this omen is just exactly that. And the realization that I have to describe to you now, the realization that I'm having it right now. I had to get up here. I was just sitting in the corner watching the cat sleep. I had to get up and I had to say, what is going on? Are we in a surge or something? Well, there's a surge coming up. And the lunar apogee, by the way, which is in the lion, is now in a stall. And Jupiter has backed off into the crab and will, for 2 months, and then will go direct and pass into the lion. This is a celestial omen that needs some more exposition that I won't put into this particular newsflash. So what can you make of all this? Where am I going with all this? Well, I'm going straight to the core. I'll give you the realization just as it's come to me. It's like an act of nature that happens in the human psyche. Picture that. The character of this realization concerns exactly what I have just described. A massive shift in attention to a massive rift in the narrative lie, and through that massive rift in the narrative lie, the beauty of her mind is pouring upon this planet. And to be an instrument to hold that beauty is all you want to do and all you need to do to have the happiest life you could ever imagine. What is the non plus ultra? I can demonstrate it right here and now. I said some time back, one of those arrogant things that I say, not even knowing how I could even dare to say anything like that race, which is the most divisive topic on the planet, is actually a big part of her correction, and it's a big part of the solution for life on this planet. Race is a massive factor in the solution to the evils on this planet. Race is the component in the rectification of the social order, although it appears to operate as a weapon of deceit and division. How does it change from something so obviously negative into something positive? It changes simply by stating the syntax of this realization. The definition of race. Race is a game of chance that deals excellence. The game deals. The game is the dealer. So race is just a game. How can that be? Well, it's obvious, isn't it, that it's genetics. And genetics is just the dice game. So race, what we call race, is simply the manifestation or expression of a genetic dice game that is continually being played. And with each generation, with the propagation of offspring through the generations, the roll of the dice continues. The rolling of the dice continues in the game of chance that produces what you see as race. So every time you look at a face or physiognomy, bodily traits of someone of a particular race, say Chinese or African or Navajo, what you are seeing is the result of the throw. The genetics process, the process of genetic selection, producing racial differences, isn't that an unarguable point, is actually a game of chance. And I don't mean that as a metaphor. I don't mean it can be viewed as a game, as if it were a game of chance. I don't mean that it is figuratively a game of chance. It is literally a game of chance. But this game of chance has a peculiar property. That is, that it deals excellence. What does it mean that the game deals excellence? And what does it mean that the game deals? There is no dealer. The game itself deals. Well, take an example of excellence, like D.H. Lawrence. D.H. Lawrence was born in the United Kingdom, and his ancestry was English or British, however you want to put it. That is to say, he was a white European. The genetic game of chance produced a human specimen. By its individuating development, because every human animal has an individuating development once it's born, through its individuating development into a particular person, into someone with a particular character, it produced the person that came to be called D.H. Lawrence. And D.H. Lawrence produced excellence. So, the genetic game of chance deals excellence. Race deals excellence. That is how it is the solution. To put it the other way around, to break out of the narrative lies about race, to break out of the propaganda, which is primarily raging anti-white propaganda, or even the propaganda about Africans and about Chinese, all the propaganda and all the lies about these races, to break out of all of this so that the concept of race stands clearly in front of you and becomes part of the solution, is simple. All you have to do is state the proposition that racial difference breeds excellence. And so if you want to know about any race, the question to ask about that race before you make any other statements about it, it's good, bad, evil, it's lazy, it's this, it's that, the question that everyone generically can ask is, what is an example of the excellence of that race? And all races find their place in the human experiment of the anthropos depending upon their excellence, because that excellence is an expression of the non plus ultra, and non plus ultra is the objective of this experiment from the pleromic point of view. Non plus ultra means that which cannot be surpassed. And what is it that cannot be surpassed? Well, certainly, in concrete terms, in evidential terms, I would say the third piano concerto of Rachmaninoff cannot be surpassed. It is a work of originality and genius and beauty and truth and passion and heroism of such a high order that it cannot be surpassed. It is a work of absolute originality. That is the non plus ultra. From the point of view of the pleromic eons, including Sophia herself, the entire company of the pleromic eons stand in witness to this experiment with the intention of seeing one thing come out of it, and that is absolute streaming originality from the human specimens in the experiment. The non plus ultra for human experience is originality. And originality is also the sign of the success of this experiment as the aeons regard it. Excellence comes from individual characters who have a racial identity. Therefore, all races stand equal before the standard of excellence. There is nothing that can be said nothing that needs to be said, especially divisive remarks, turning one race against the other, making one race a diabolical monster, making another race an equally diabolical victim, like the Arabs are a diabolical victim race. The way to avoid all that lying narrative, break through it in a heartbeat, is to ask the question, well, how does that race compare in its excellence with all the other races? Because it's only the excellence that comes out of the race through the individual specimens of the experiment that matters. It's the only thing that matters to the aeons. The rest is dross. And it's the only thing that matters in a world worth living in. Because the world isn't worth living in if the human animal cannot thrive and go to its highest potential. And all it takes is some human animals in the society to do that, and they uplift the whole remainder of the society to a level of truth, beauty, and goodness that is truly the fulfillment of humanity. And nothing else is. Everything else is just window dressing. The Aeon Sophia is an extravagant creature, and so are her magical children. We are extravagant, and we aspire to excellence and originality. Now, here's a little sermon on race, if you will. Whenever you consider race, if you want to consider it in truth for what it actually is, then think of the various colors that are loosely associated with race. White race, yellow race, red race, black race, and so forth. And then think of the evil that is done on this planet. When the narrative breaks on race and the truth comes pouring through, because the beauty of her mind turns into truth in the human mind. You see that? It's like an alchemical metamorphosis of beauty into truth. When that happens, you see the truth about those colors and the truth about evil at the same time. Race is a solution to evil. The correct understanding of race is the solution, provides the solution to evil. Why? Because evil has no color. Evil favors no race. No one race commits more or less evil on this planet than any other. Because evil tendencies are not reducible to racial factors. Different kinds of genius manifest through different racial expressions. The genius of Rachmaninoff's piano concertos, the genius of Cervantes writing Don Quixote, the genius of Matisse. So there you have it. A French painter, Spanish novelist, a Russian composer. Race is a game of chance that deals excellence. The game deals. The game is the dealer. Do you see that? But when it comes to evil, race does not deal evil, because the source of evil in the human animal is generic. The tendency toward evil is generically human in all races, and it spreads contagiously across races in a horrific fashion. Some races get more publicity for the evil actions of their members. This happens to be the case right now with you-know-who, Whitey, the white devil. Some races get more press for the evil actions of their members, but that is part of the technique of the narrative lie. That is simply a lie. The evil done by human beings upon this planet has nothing to do with race. Evil has no color. It is a generic human tendency that belongs to everyone. Now, the white race gets more exposure for both the evils committed by certain of its members, but also for the excellence produced by certain of its members, which, if I may humbly say so, is far in excess of any other breed. And it's about time somebody said so. Now, if that's a racist comment, then my response is very simple. The label racist is anti-white hate speech. Pure and simple. The label Nazi is anti-white, anti-excellent hate speech. That's all you need to know. What I'm saying now changes the narrative, and my saying it makes it so. Vox City. One man standing in a room in the middle of the night in Spain, speaking the truth that comes to his mind out of the beauty of her mind pouring into all of our minds, changes what is described. Vox City. And that is because it is a speaking of the mind that just happens to have the voice of a particular person. But it's what everyone else is already thinking about anyway. You see? Those who are still sane and those who are able to think and able to hold a sane thought know already that the label racist is finished. My saying so makes it so. And the proper and correct and singular way to respond to that accusation is to say simply in a dispassionate and almost offhand manner, no, water off a duck's back, pal. Racist is anti-white hate speech, period. The whole racial narrative is busting at the seams. And the Mars-Venus conjunction, as an omen, probably means that this happens now due to the appearance of the Calico War Party, because Mars and Venus represent the male and female warriors in the party. Okay? Why would this particular problem break open and start to fall apart due to the announcement of the Calico War Party? Well, it's quite simple. Because whether even people know it's there or not, it only takes 3 people to know it's there, and it goes into the endopsyche of the human animal in a kaleidoscopic and fractal extrapolation, which is how Vox City works. And consequently, having been given the liberty to fight back, people come to their senses and they realize the truth that is already speaking in their minds, just as is speaking in mind right now. In mind right now. In mind. There's only one mind. All Buddhas and all sentient beings are nothing but the one mind. Thank you, Huang Po. Evil has no color. Evil has no race. No one race commits more or less evil than any other. Therefore, races are off the hook. All races. Even the so-called Jewish race, which is the biggest fraud psyop that the human species ever committed on itself. Okay? do to the evil trickster. So it is something that humans do to themselves, but they are set up to betray their humanity by the evil trickster, and there is only one evil trickster, and you know who it is. The Gnostics identified that particular trickster. One is all it takes, my friends. The tendency toward evil behavior, working against life, harming the web of life, interfering with the natural order of life, the natural symbiosis, the natural tendencies toward mutual aid, interfering with the freedom of human individuals, of communities, of nations. All of those tendencies do not come from any particular race. Race is off the hook. It's over. Race can only be viewed in the ultimate perspective of this experiment as the game of chance that deals excellence. And every race deserves to be and ought to be evaluated by the excellence it produces. That's what's really interesting. And all races can come together, just like the Chinese pianist who plays Rachmaninoff. All races can come together and celebrate the excellence that each of them brings to the altar of this experiment for the satisfaction of the pleroma aeons. Clear? If there is such a thing as racial equality, have you heard that term before? Then it is clearly seen in the fact that all races are equal in the game of producing excellence. All races deal excellence, but they are not all equal in the excellence they deal. They are all equal in dealing it, dealing hands of excellence, you could say, using the analogy of a card game. All races deal hands of excellence, but they do not all deal excellence in equal measure. So what is the answer to the riddle of racial equality? All races are equal in one way and unequal in another way. Likewise, considering the individual members of the race, let's say the individual members of the race of Italians. Okay, Italians are a race, the Latin race. The Latin race, the Italic race, deals excellence in some of its members, but not in all. The various African races deal excellence, but not all in the same measure as can be measured by the individual specimens of that race. And so it is a fact, and it is a very great fact, and it is an unavoidable fact that every single human being in his or her own mind needs to admit that the production of excellence in the different races is not of the same measure. So races are different in respect to how much excellence they can produce and what kind of excellence they produce. Now, this might be considered to be bad news because it's a categorical statement of inequality, let's face it. And doesn't it just feed us right back into the problem again of racial inequality, racial difference, and all of the disruption that causes? Not at all. Not at all, I would say, given that humanity and that human beings can come to some kind of humility. You know, this is a very high-risk game, this experiment. Conditions are required of individual human animals to carry this experiment to success. Believe me, I know what I'm talking about. And I know what those conditions are, and I want to teach as clearly as I can what those conditions are. The humility required to succeed in this experiment goes like this. Well, if you happen to be a specimen of any race who hasn't been dealt a hand of excellence, well, the least you can do is recognize those who have. And the success of this experiment depends as much upon hands of excellence being dealt to particular individuals as it does equally upon the recognition of those individuals by those who have not been dealt a hand of excellence. And I'm going to give it to you straight. I'm not saying I'm sorry to say this. In fact, I'm happy to say this. But it is a very hard truth. If the individual human specimens of any race have not been dealt a hand of excellence and they can't bring the recognition of it to those who have, then write the whole fucking thing off. Write it off. It is an absolute requirement. But I don't think it's an impossibility, because excellence, which contains all the noble qualities of the human animal, is very attractive. In its own nature, it is very attractive. If we weren't in a constant torrent of lies, of facing a constant torrent of lies, tearing down the excellence of the human animal, then it would be self-evident that excellence contains beauty, truth, and goodness. And it is attractive.
And I dare say it is not too much to ask of individuals who have not been dealt the high hand, to look up to and admire those who have been and who demonstrate excellence, genius, those who express originality, which is the proof of the NPU. It's natural on human terms to be this way. Arete in any nation or culture can be a magnet for those who do not attain it due to the throw of the dice. But can those who do not attain it show respect and gratitude for those who do? Recognition is essential in this experiment. Those who are superior in excellence need it from those who are inferior, so that the entire membership of society can coexist and thrive, and so that the different dimensions of genius, both grand and trivial, can manifest. It's as simple as that, but what a challenge resides in those simple, perhaps all too simple words. Hey, let's admit, not everyone who is born Italian can be a genius on the level of Federico Fellini.
But those Italians who love and admire Fellini are ennobled by their recognition of him. And they can be excellent in many small ways. There are many small ways to be excellent. Many small ways. And then there are the grander ways. And it is in the synergy and the blend of these two kinds of excellence and the spectrum that lies between them that you see the success of this experiment, and nothing less will do. Nothing less than the non plus ultra will do. It has to be originality, or it's nothing at all. That is the way this experiment is designed. It has to be originality that brings the experiment to success. Originality is non plus ultra. The attainment of it is within the reach of every single human animal who is not too damaged. Now, I know I've said some things in this spontaneous news flash that call for a little elaboration, some things that need to be balanced out. But I'm just presenting the realization without rehearsal at the moment that I am inside it. So I'll dedicate the next news flash to the follow-up of this one, and particularly to one subject that is not often discussed. One subject that belongs to the behavioral inventory of the human animal, let's say, that tends to get overlooked, which is strange because it's in your face all the time. But there's a tendency to overlook it. There's a tendency not to use it. I call it the C word, and I don't mean cunt. I mean cruelty. So, I'd like to leave this recording where it is at this moment. Leave it to the point that I've taken it, and to pick it up from here in the next newsflash with a focus on this most crucial of subjects: cruelty.